probably over 3 months later, and we're back at it with another stand review. This time around, we're going to be talking about Silver Chariot. Silver Chariot is one of those stands that, well, let's put it bluntly here, nobody plays Silver Chariot. This is probably up there in like the top 5, maybe top 3 stands that 0 people in the entire game actually use. That's probably helped a whole lot when you consider that the fact that if you just use a requiem arrow, then you get the objective best stand in the entire game. But you know, you'd think there'd be some people playing Silver Chariot, considering that it's basically a main character of Part 3, but nope, none of them. And is that because the stand is just bad? Well, honestly, not really. Silver Chariot is okay, and it can put up a decent fight against some of the better stands in the game. So as to why nobody is playing it, well, I do think there are a few reasons, and it's probably the finicky nature of the stand itself. Silver Chariot has the potential of being an extremely powerful stand with some really solid tools, but because of a few bugs and inconsistencies, it can never really reach that potential. And based on the current track record of the fact that we haven't seen anything new being added in a year, I think it's safe to say that it's never going to get any of that fixed. But regardless, Silver Chariot is still a perfectly alright stand to use, so let's jump into the moveset and we'll talk about exactly what it's capable of accomplishing. Starting things off here, we're actually going to talk about the M1s, Barrage, etc. in conjunction with the toggle armor ability because both of these go hand in hand. And I also want to talk about toggle armor since I think it's simultaneously the most important and most misunderstood move that Silver Chariot has. As for the M1s, they're pretty simple. They do 6 damage per hit, and when you shed your armor, they attack faster. It should be noted that despite the fact that you attack faster, your damage does not go down. In fact, when it comes to the Barrage, it's actually just a flat damage increase. With your armor shed, your Barrage lasts the same amount of time, but has more hits in it, basically just increasing the damage that it does. The real takeaway that you need to have when it comes to toggle armor is that there is 0 reason to ever not have your armor toggled off. To clear up a few misconceptions, toggle armor does not make you take increased damage from sources, and it also does not decrease the amount of damage that you do. In fact, toggle armor has no effect on any of the moves aside from M1s and your Barrage. Your Barrage finisher, Million Pricks, Cycle Slash, and Last Shot are all completely unaffected by toggle armor. Finally, moving past toggle armor, and we're going to talk about our first ability on the docket, which is Last Shot. Last Shot is a projectile where you fire your sword directly towards your crosshair. The projectile is pretty slow moving, but the catch is when it hits a wall or any sort of surface, it bounces off that surface and bounces directly towards an opponent that's in range. The move itself only deals 12 damage, but to make up for its low damage, it's capable of bypassing block. It won't break the block, but if it hits someone who is blocking, it'll go straight through it. The move itself is also cancelable and has a very small amount of stun on it. So little stun, in fact, that if you fire it at close range and you hit your opponent, a lot of the time it'll either end you directly neutral or at disadvantage against your opponent. It truly is a projectile meant to be used as a projectile, so using it at close range is ill-advised. The next move that we have to talk about is Cycle Slash. Cycle Slash is a very simple AoE move that deals 24.6 damage. The move itself, regardless of how close you are to the opponent after the move finishes, ends you neutral with your opponent. In terms of attributes, the move is blockable, however, it's uncancelable unless you're hit with a ragdoll. When it comes to the upgrades for Cycle Slash, I would say without a doubt they are 100% worth getting. Because Cycle Slash has some knockback built into the move, it's always better to have more range because even if you're right on top of them, sometimes the enemy can bounce out of your attack if you don't have enough range on it. Our final move to touch on is the most interesting hands down, and that's Million Pricks. The reason that Million Pricks is so interesting is the fact that it's one of the only moves in the game that after hitting your opponent and them continuing to take damage, you can use any action you want. Effectively, it's a combo starter slash extender that your imagination can go wild with because you can land any move in the game off of it. Which is probably the reason that Silver Chariot has basically no moves that are good at capitalizing off of this move. It's a cool thing called balancing, something that recent YBA has not heard of. Anyways, the move deals about 25-ish damage, I don't have the exact numbers, and a completely useless piece of information is that it actually does not increase with damage the more upgrades you get to make it last longer. For whatever reason, they decided that maybe this would be OP, and so the move's hits deal less damage the longer you get it to last. The biggest thing to note about Million Pricks, of course, is that it's able to hit ragdolled players. This can be used in a huge variety of ways, but you should take into consideration that people can hold block when they stand up, and then let go of block and summon a stand. So against better players, it's not as OP as it sounds. But against most YBA players, that's a really, really good trait. Another interesting trait is that while you can block the hits that are active during the move, you can't actually block the move itself outright. Even if you block the first hit, you're still going to have to block the rest of the hits in the move. Now all this sounds good, but here comes the finicky part of Silver Chariot. And that's that Million Pricks has knockback built into it, meaning that if the opponent jumps into the air, they'll go directly away from you, causing them to fly up into the sky and you can't hit them. It's really frustrating and has the potential of completely losing you a game. Now I think that's about a wrap for the moveset for Silver Chariot, so let's jump into the strategies and talk about exactly how you should be playing Silver Chariot. Honestly, when it comes to Silver Chariot, there are a lot of ways you can play this stand, and most of them will probably work out. It's not nearly as rigid as a lot of other stands are, and so I don't necessarily think that there's one winning strategy. And that's made especially clear when you realize how many specs can be used well with Silver Chariot. In the past, I've talked about using Silver Chariot with Vampire and how you can do some crazy combos with that. But honestly, Silver Chariot is really versatile, and I think it not only works with Vampire, but also works quite well with Boxing and Hamon. I haven't done too much thinking about how it would work with Pluck, but I imagine it would be fine there as well. So really, as long as you're not using Spin, you're gonna be able to make this work. One of Silver Chariot's very obvious strengths is its M1 speed. While the M1s don't do that much damage, an interesting fact about them is that the first 4 of the 5 M1s actually true combo into each other. Unfortunately, actually making use of this true combo can be kind of difficult because of the way M1 knockback works. It's really janky, and a lot of the time you'll either miss an attack or an attack will be delayed and it won't properly combo. But I can assure you that if done properly, you can true combo all 4 M1s. This means you can effectively do 24 damage if you win any exchange with M1s. As for M1 follow-ups, I think your safest option if you do manage to start landing a string is to actually go for Million Pricks regardless of the situation. The thing about Million Pricks is that you win no matter what if you use it. They don't have enough time to mash out of it by hitting you with an M1 because they just got stunned by yours. If they dash backwards, they'll still get hit by it and you can just run forward and continue a combo. And if they block, you can fire Last Shot, which will bypass them and make them continue to take damage. As for when you actually land Million Pricks, as I said earlier, Silver Chariot really doesn't have very many good moves to capitalize on actually landing the move. Cycle Slash isn't really worth using here because it's got a good chunk of end lag, a decent amount of startup, and really the takeaway is M1s are your friend. It can be a little bit difficult at times because when you use your M1s, if you accidentally do a 5th punch, you basically void your entire combo. But in essence, what you want to do if you hit them with Million Pricks is hit them with 3 or 4 M1s, maybe 2 more, and then a stun. A quick tip when it comes to trying to hit people as they're getting knocked back by the Million Pricks and your M1s is that you should basically put your character model inside of theirs. That way when you actually go to use the move, the actual startup of the move is going to be finished by the time the opponent gets to you from the knockback. It sounds really simple, but in practice this matters a lot. As for hitting people on the ground, this is something that you can do if you get the opportunity, but a lot of the time you're just not going to get the chance unless you're using a spec specifically designed to accomplish this task. I touched on it a little bit in the moveset section, but Last Shot has a boatload of end lag, a lot more than it looks like you should actually have, and so I highly recommend that you don't throw this out next to the opponent like you would with something like the World Knives or honestly really any projectile in the game aside from this one. It's one of the only ones in the game that has a sizable chunk of end lag, and it's deceptively long, so you gotta be careful. And finally, Psycho Slash is basically something that you should just chuck out every time it's available. Most stands aren't going to be able to punish you well even if you miss this move, and while it can be incredibly inconsistent because of the knockback and the fact that people can just dash away, if you land it, it's still free damage and it has a massive hitbox if you've got it max upgraded. Overall, the way I tend to play Silver Chariot is that I try to make it so that my opponent has as little time to breathe as possible, making the best use of my fast M1s as possible, and using all of my moves immediately upon them being off of cooldown. This is a strategy that works well against some stands and really bad against others. Namely, stands like the World AU can absolutely demolish this strategy by having a whole lot of moves that can relieve pressure and give them combos. Now that I think about it, every single move does that. Knives, gun, and chop, if they're used at any point, basically just resets the neutral or hands the neutral to the opponent. So you have to be careful with stands that are capable of doing things like that. But for other stands that can either put out less pressure or the same amount of pressure, you're probably going to have a better chance if you just consistently keep up the attack as much as possible. With that, I think I've wrapped up strategies though, so let's jump over to Counterplay and talk about how to deal with Silver Chariot. So, time stop. Jokes aside, time stop is the best way to deal with Silver Chariot, as is the best way to deal with really any of the stands that don't have counterplay to time stop. And Silver Chariot especially has zero counterplay to time stop. There is nothing a Silver Chariot can do to avoid your time stop. They don't have a counter, they don't have something that can take them out of the dimension, nothing. So if you time stop them, even without a time stop confirm, you can just do damage for free. Now, if you don't have time stop, that's what we're really here to talk about. I think the number one thing that you need to consider when going up against Silver Chariot is how you're gonna deal with Million Pricks. Because if you mess up when dealing with Million Pricks, that's how Silver Chariot really does its damage. Obviously, a strategy could be trying to avoid Million Pricks, but there is a lot of ways that Silver Chariot players can land this move, so really it's kind of an inevitability, and you just need to be paying attention to how you're going to deal with it when it inevitably happens. The first and most important thing is be careful with your barrage. Because Million Pricks always knocks you back, if you throw out your barrage to try to avoid damage that you're going to take, then they can just stand still and you'll go away from them. They can wait and then dash in and barrage you and get the punish. You need to be paying attention while you're getting hit to see if they start doing a move that has wind up, such as Eye Gouge, and then barrage. Otherwise, if you use your barrage too early, it's just not gonna work out. As for barraging, if it comes down to a panic, you actually have a little bit of an advantage against Silver Chariot just in general with barrages. Silver Chariot's hitbox on its barrage is not as good as other barrages in the game, and because of that, you'll hit them with more hits of your barrage than they'll hit with theirs. It also means that sometimes you can jank yourself out of a barrage even if barraging first, but that's not consistent, so I wouldn't risk it. Most Silver Chariot players are really one note and are gonna do the same kind of thing every single time their moves are off cooldown, especially when it comes to Cycle Slash. And Cycle Slash is one of the ways that Silver Chariot players are going to chip away your health. But it's simultaneously very easy to see coming when they're going to do it and just block it outright. If you do manage to block it, you are at a small bit of advantage, which means that you'll probably be able to get 1 or 2 M1s, but you're not going to get much more than that. So remember that if you block Cycle Slash, don't get too greedy, because once again, if you get hit by Million Pricks, that's where the damage is going to be coming from. Overall, Silver Chariot is a very flowchart-esque stand to play. And because of that, getting a read on your opponent that's using this isn't too hard because they don't have very many ways to actually mix up their gameplay. So while it's easy to say just read the opponent and pick up on their habits, with Silver Chariot, it's considerably easier than other stands just because of their lack of options. Now obviously, as I mentioned earlier, and the last thing that I think I'm going to have to mention here, is that if you're hit with million pricks during a ragdoll, all hope is not lost. If you hold block when you stand up, wait a little bit until your stand cooldown is done, and then let go and immediately press Q, you can summon your stand and stop any of these cheese combos that the Silver Chariot is trying on you. The timing is tight, but it is possible. And it's also worth going for, because if you simply hold block, you're bound to get hit by a last shot, have your guard destroyed, and then you're gonna get messed up. So yeah, that's what I got for Counterplay. Let's jump over to the conclusion and wrap this thing up. When I went into this review, I really was expecting Silver Chariot to be a complete chore to play, and I'm happy to report that I was wrong. I think I came in with a pretty hefty bias, since the only times that I'd played Silver Chariot was when I was trying to ultra cheese with Vampire, or when I was absolutely suffering with Silver Chariot Spin. And I think that Silver Chariot Spin episode that I had, where I had to use it not only in the Builder Bust, but then again in my 100k special, that tainted Silver Chariot forever for me. And I really think it probably took until now for me to finally give Silver Chariot the shot that it genuinely deserved. As for my actual thoughts on Silver Chariot, do I think it's good? Do I think it's bad? I'm not too sure. It's definitely much safer to just tell you this stand is bad because it's inconsistent, which I definitely think is true, but I did genuinely have a pretty good time playing with it. It was so radically different from everything I'm used to playing that it was almost like a breath of fresh air. Now obviously the frustration still set in, especially when playing against the plethora of the world they use on Ranked, which basically directly counter this stand. But even still, I think Silver Chariot is a great showcase of how a lot of the stands in YBA play so radically different and yet remain similar enough that if you're good at one or two of them, you can probably play the rest of them pretty competently. It's truly a solid statement to how much of a shame it is that YBA hasn't gotten any content updates in so long, with just how phenomenal of a game it truly is. And I know there's a lot of haters out there that will say that I'm joking, or that it's a mockery when I say that YBA is good, but I'm not. The game is good, and I'll say that till the end of time. If it wasn't good, we wouldn't all be sitting here wanting it to get updated. YBA in its current state is in a good enough state that even without a lot of sound effects that got removed because of copyright, and without a real content update in coming up on a year now, there's still 20,000 or so people playing on a concurrent basis. If that doesn't speak to the game's longevity, I don't know what else does. But I'm getting a little bit off topic. The point is, Silver Chariot is worth your time. Even with the janky M1s, and even with people sometimes deciding that they want to fly to the moon when hit with million pricks, it's still a good time to use something that's genuinely just different. So if you've been looking at Silver Chariot and all you've been thinking about is Silver Chariot Requiem and cheesing, maybe give the pre-evolution a shot, because it really can be a good time. With that though, I'm wrapping up here. So if you made it all the way to the end of this video, then I implore you to not only hit the like button and subscribe, but also to go down and turn your notifications to all. Odds are if you watched all the way to the end of this video, you're probably interested in everything I post, and YouTube as of late has not been doing me any favors, even when it comes to Roblox JoJo. So if you want to see everything I upload and you don't want it to get eaten by the YouTube algorithm, then by all means hit the notification bell and turn it to all. Anyways, that's all I've got for today, so have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you next time.